You're listening to Witch Wednesdays, your weekly podcast source for all things witchcraft in the modern world. Welcome back to Witch Wednesdays. I'm Steph, and I have a guest here with me today to chat. So I am going to go ahead and turn it over to her so she can introduce herself and let you know where you can find her online.
Hi, my name is Annamarie Green. It is wonderful to be here. I am an intuitive therapist. So I'm a professional intuitive, a licensed therapist, and a mom who is on a mission to help people navigate life's darker moments through energy work and psychology. So it's really cool because I get to combine, my two loves, which, I'm a licensed therapist with a background in social work, and then the energy work to help you guys meet your goals faster and understand mental health and on a deeper level. And you can find me on Instagram at Annamarie F. Green, or my website, annamariegreen.com.
And I love that. I think that is so interesting. And I would love to chat first. How did your path start? Like, what sort of led you to this very specific kind of area?
Yeah. So, I've been in social work since undergrad, but then the intuitive work really started to happen when I lost my partner in 2019, and I started to dip my toes into spiritual topics. So I went to a medium, and then I started to watch different intuitives and different people who did a lot of energy work and things online. And when I became a therapist in 2020, I didn't realize at the time, but I would get a lot of intuitive downloads. I would just be able to get clients to the root cause and to their goals a lot faster than my colleagues. And I was like, there has to be something that I'm missing that the people around me, aren't having the same results as I am. And then when I went through an intuitive certification program where we learned different healings, how to do energetic readings, all that kind of stuff, is really when I was shown the method that I use now. And because I have that background in psychology and therapy, all that kind of stuff, I'm able to understand, what I receive intuitively and what I see energetically a lot deeper.
That is a really interesting perspective then that you have, because I think a lot of your colleagues would not be going about that the same way.
Yeah. Therapists, the therapy industry is really interesting because, you have different people who specialize in different things. And for some people, I had a lot of colleagues who were like, no, it's totally normal to see someone for 2 to 3 years, to be working through a problem for 2 to 3 years. And that's if you're doing things well and correctly, and people were praised for that. And I was not that type of practitioner. My colleagues would call me the therapist you send people when therapy doesn't work for people. And yeah, because I would see someone, and a lot of times we would be getting through problems within 3 to 4 months, 6 months at the most, which didn't make me super popular with the clinics, because I had a higher turnover rate than my colleagues in regards to how long I was seeing people. But it's really interesting because and I know that there are other therapists who are energetically curious and things like that, but I didn't know anyone in my sphere who was making the same connections and the same understanding. If anything, they were even my friends now, they're still a little bit I don't know what you're doing really. And when I gave one of them a reading, and he was like, how did you know this? How'd you know this stuff? And I was like, I saw it when I was doing the reading. So yeah.
I love that. No, I think that's really great, because therapy is a wonderful tool. And we've said that all the time on this podcast, that we love therapy and therapy can help, but it's also, and there are situations where this is not the case, but it's not supposed to be something that you stick with forever and ever. You're working through problems in a shorter span of time. And it's interesting that you say that, because I have heard that 3-year thing before. You're not the first person to tell me that. I thought that was the standard, but apparently it does not have to be.
No, it doesn't have to be. And I don't know if it what the majority of therapists think, but for me, I always for me, that was a little bit unethical, because you don't know where somebody's going to be in 3 years. And you don't know if they're going to have the resources to continue therapy. My goal is really, when a person comes to see me, I want to help you get to where you want to go. in the best possible way and the most efficiently. And for me, I was not the type of therapist who would take your fluff. So some clients will stay very surface level. And those are usually the clients who are like, therapy doesn't work for me. I don't really feel like we talk about anything like deeper. And I am always the one who is going to push you to go deeper because that's where the real work is. And I didn't know it, but I would get downloads about like clients and where they needed to go before the session and during the session. And so that's when I started to integrate it. And then once I finished my intuitive healing, program, it was about a 4-month program. I really went to work at combining these because there's so much that I think people don't know or understand. And a lot of people think you're either doing energy work or you're doing like the traditional, more science-backed clinical therapy, psychology work, but they actually go hand in hand.
Yes, that is my favorite thing. I know that you are
Yes.
you've heard me say this so many times, but
Mm-hmm.
I love when people combine the two and let everybody know that science and technology and modern medicine and advancement all go hand in hand with the witchcraft side of things and the spiritual side of things. They interconnect. Absolutely. I don't think that they need to be at odds. So absolutely love that. That is exactly what you do in your practice.
Yes, absolutely. So it's my favorite thing. I absolutely love it. And I love being able to help people understand it as well.
And so something that we were specifically going to get into today that you kind of specialize in, and I think is unique to you, is the idea that you were talking about darker spiritual energies, and how that impacts us. Because I really am interested in that topic, and I don't think that's something that specifically I've talked too much in depth about on this podcast. So let's jump in there. That's like a huge
absolutely.
Topic,
yes. Oh my gosh. So I like this topic is one of my favorite things to actually educate people about too, because it's not something that I feel like a lot of energetic practitioners talk about, because I think it's still kind of taboo. And it's kind of like, we don't want to scare the people away. Like, you know what I mean?
That's exactly what it is.
So what I have found is that with darker entities and energies, is that sometimes the things that we experience mental health wise has to do with some type of energy or entity attaching themselves to us. And there's different layers, but on a very like general, to start off with, on a very general plane, you, especially with like depression, a lot of times when we experience something traumatic, we open up our energy because our bodies as well as our energies are like, okay, how am I going to survive this? What do I need to do? And so sometimes that means we're actually calling entities into us, especially when we're children, because we don't have those protections or awareness to kind of like set boundaries. And so that can call entities, different energies onto us that then will kind of stick and stay, and they can feel very heavy, and they keep us in specific patterns. They keep us in survival mode. And they blocks like energetic flow within our body. So a lot of times some of the things that I'll see with depression is that there actually are a lot of times a lot of beings that are attached to the person. And that can add to like that feeling of like heaviness, of sluggishness, of feeling exhausted, of not being able to cope with rage. And one of the things that they actually have you do when you are going through the intuitive like certification program is everyone receives a specific kind of healing called a compassionate beings release. And so essentially what that is you're having, your classmates in the program do this healing for you, and it's releasing all of these different beings. Like sometimes you'll do like 3 at a time and then go back and do more. But everyone essentially has beings on you, and it does impact the patterns and the mindsets that you have. And it can actually really take hold of like your physical body and how your physical body looks, and anxious behaviors you have. And then it can go even on a deeper level. That's where a lot of times I will see personality disorders. Like the denser the energetic entity, the more likely I am to see personality disorders, because personality disorders, they are caused by such trauma that like it usually means that their aura, their energy has been completely open, and they're like stuck at whatever point the trauma occurred, if that makes sense. And I can go like deeper or more specific. I just want to make sure I give you time to digest and the audience time to digest as well.
Yeah, that is a heavy topic, but I think that the audience kind of understands, because it's something that comes up a lot with new witches who were sort of venturing down the path, that they're like, okay, suddenly I feel a lot of, energy, maybe spirits. This used to happen, and now all of a sudden I'm getting like hauntings, quote unquote, in my house. Like, why is this going on? And it's just, you're tapping into more energy, and that attracts energy. So other beings, other spirits, I've heard this with witches who practice fairy magic and the fae, their energy is attracted to energy. So the more that you are doing the spells and rituals, the more energy you're putting out and you have around you, things are attracted to that. And it kind of makes sense then that a darker side of that exists as well, where your energy is on that lower, maybe depression, something else that's going to attract more negative energies like that as well.
Yes, absolutely. And when you one of the things that I learned pretty early on, because when I was young, I was intuitive. Looking back, I was terrified of, like, I grew up Catholic, so I was terrified of like the devil and like any type of dark energy. I was terrified of ghosts. I was terrified of anything paranormal and like all that kind of stuff. And I would pick up on, darker, denser energies. And then I kind of like learned to like ignore things. I had my routine, I would pray and stuff like that. But when I started to learn about this work, one of the things that I realized, as well as what I understand about like the subconscious psychologically, is when we have a wound that's stored within our bodies or even within our subconscious mind, it has its own energetic frequency. So if you start to work in energy, like you said, like your baby witch is getting into stuff, and you have these unprocessed wounds, that frequency is going to be amplified when you're starting to call things in. And so that's why intentions and setting boundaries, even like when you're starting to go into this work, is important, especially if you haven't done, a lot of the emotional legwork. Whenever you have any type of, like, you're going into something spiritual, there's always a level of emotional legwork.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that empaths would really understand what you're talking about right now, and just walking into a room and picking up everything that everyone is feeling. And if you are not an empath and have not experienced that, which I am not, I have a great wall of do not pick up on things like a lot of you do. But I know that that is very common. And then it's very common to take those feelings and energies home with you.
Yes.
All of a sudden you're feeling things that are not your own.
Yes. Yeah. And a lot of times, once they like take them home with you, they don't have to necessarily stay on you, but they can stay like in your home or in your, like around you. That still cause distress. It can cause like nightmares or difficulty sleeping, all that kind of stuff. So it's really important to just be cognizant of that. One of the things that I learned in the last, year or so, is specifically like substances and addiction. So, in mental health, a lot of people will talk about addiction and sobriety and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things I learned on an energetic level is that addicts, because of their consumption of alcohol, of substances, it actually opens up their field. So even if they have shields, it can kind of like poke holes in your shields or in your aura. And it just opens the door for these beings to come in, and they tend to bring them home with them. So I've had a lot of clients who had parents who were alcoholics or addicts, and they stress, and it impacted their mental health as teenagers, as children, because this parent was bringing stuff home all the time. And so it actually caused their energy to always be on guard, in survival mode, which then put their body in distress all of the time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That absolutely makes sense as to how that work.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's just so many different levels to it, that, I don't think a lot of people do talk about, because it sounds like it sounds like a very scary topic. But one of the things, and one of the reasons I want to share more about this, is because there are things that you can do to help prevent beings from attaching to you, to clear them from your energies, so and just allow you to have that clear space and feel more of yourself and process your emotions without the pressure or influence of these energetic parasites, so to
Which is
speak.
perfect, because that's exactly the next question that I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Was to say, how could somebody sort of recognize that this might be happening to them, and what would be like sort of the first steps about figuring out what's going on and clearing that?
Yeah. So one of the things that, like, as a sign that you might have, a being attached to is or in your home, is kind of like if you recognize that you were always like anxious or just distressed, like you were on edge all the time. And then like when you are, triggered or something happens, that you feel like you're not even yourself. Like you don't know why you react this way. Some of those same things that like might bring us to therapy in the first place. Those are usually like big identifiers to me, especially if somebody is like, I don't really know who I am. I don't know why I react this way. Like, I don't know why I get so angry and I express myself in this way. Like I know that I don't hate this person, or I don't, they struggle with relationships. That's usually a big identifier for me. Or if you are somebody who identifies with having like very extreme highs and lows, that kind of thing. And then what can you do to start clearing yourself and protecting yourself from these, darker energies, entities. So one of the first things you can do is just like every single night before you go to bed, is I always call in like light from source, and I just have it like go through my body, and I set the intention like this is clearing anything from my body, from my energetic body, from my physical body. And if you know how to do a body scan, you can look for any dark patches in your aura or on your body. You can always start with just like kind of like poking it. Does it seem like, is it something that's a little bit like looser, like a wound, or does it have a shape? Anything that you might see is like a shape, or like an animal or something like that. That's usually a being. And you can set the intention, like you can call in any of the guides or ascended masters you work with, if you don't feel comfortable doing it yourself. But like you essentially want to push it up towards the light, or you can push it down into the earth, but outside of your body, so that it can like return to the light and be turned into something more beautiful and wonderful. And then protection wise, before you leave the house, if you are going out like drinking and things like that, setting like an energetic protection bubble and set a really strong intention that it's going to hold, that nothing can attach to you or come into your energetic, body field. And you can always, reinforce it by you. If you're somebody who likes to use like crystals or herbs and things like that, you can always reinforce it with those kinds of things. It just depends on how comfortable you are with your own energetic protection practice.
Do you find in your line of work that you are doing these things every day?
Oh yeah, I do these, especially when I am doing, because I do so many healings, and because in the healings I'm usually clearing at least one being from a person. And if it's somebody who this is like their first healing, their first reading, it's multiple beings, and they can be very dense. So I am always doing these things, and especially as somebody, I'm considered a transmuter, so I can turn, darker, denser energy into light. It's a lot of times I will call things in unconsciously as well, but more so because they're ready to be turned into light. So I'm always like making sure that, I'm not courting with anything or anyone, and I'm clearing my energy. It's a way for me to feel safe in my practice. And in the past, even as a therapist, I realized that I would let clients cord to me, and I would let these different things in when I didn't have a practice like that. So I do it pretty much every day. But it's become something like, going on a walk, just because it also feels good. So it turned into this really great part of my routine.
Yeah, I think that is a great way to sort of start
Yes.
and end your day. I mean, regardless of what you do for a living, but especially for you, I can see that.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And you can always, if you're somebody who's like, oh, I just don't think that a daily practice is gonna, work for me, because I understand, I've been there. One of the things you can do is you can do it, weekly, where you just do a lot, spend a little bit of a longer time clearing your energy and taking your time, and then set the intention that, this energetic field that you're putting up is going to hold like for a week or for whatever amount of time that you are going to dedicate. If it's once a week, it's once every 3 days, you can set and leave it, but you just really have to set the protection or set the intentions for it and ask for help from your guides or whoever you work with.
And if somebody were, doing their clearings and trying to heal this, is there anything that they can do then to protect themselves and their family going forward?
Yeah. So, especially when it comes to like your family, because I have a 5-year-old, so I regularly like do little protections for her and stuff for her as well. There's lots of different things you can do it, and it depends like what kind of witch you are. Like some people, I also use herbs and stuff sometimes. But you can, for your home, for example, it's called like the bubble and shielding you can do for yourself, but then it's called gridding. So for your home, you can grid every doorway, every like entryway, and kind of like clean up your space. If you can, what you would do is you would close your eyes and focus on the space. Like if it's an office, if it's a room, and I do recommend wherever you do your practice, your rituals, to energetically kind of cleanse it once a week. But you would use a spiral sacred geometric shape and just kind of like see the energy like almost like a little mini tornado and like whirl it up, and you would send it up to the light or into the earth. And that's going to just help everything like stay fresh, or like even if some stagnant energy hangs around, like it's not going to call in other things. And it also helps, like for me, and when people come into my house, I have a grid on my door. So when they come through the door, it kind of like washes them, because it's like, I use like the element of water for it. But it kind of like washes them as they come through. So they're not bringing as much junk with them when they come into my house. Yes. When they
I use crystals for the same purpose. I'm like, that's not coming in here.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's like, you're welcome, but your crap, your stuff is not. So yeah, yes, I highly recommend it. Having the same way you would clean your house is the same frequency that you should be doing energy clearings of different areas of your house.
I absolutely try to do that regularly.
Yes.
And, if it's just the normal family members that live here that are usually here, then everything's like okay. But when we have to like go out and deal with other people in the world, but then also those people like come over here, I'm like, oh gosh, you all have like so much going on.
I know. I know. I'm the same way. Yes. And that and my daughter, this is something you can always teach your kids, is just teach them like before they go to school, they leave the house. Like, even though my daughter, she's only 5, so she like does it very like, I guess what I would call like sloppy, but she, I'll say, did you bubble and shield? And so she just closes her eyes, she takes a deep breath, and she uses her hands, and she's literally like, okay, like she just puts her hands like in front of her as for a shield, and then makes a bubble with her hands and imagines she's in the middle of it before she leaves the house. And that is like a way that she helps keep, also because she's so empathetic as well, it helps her keep other people's like energies and emotions out of her field, so she doesn't have to process so much during the day. She can really focus, and that actually helps her with focus in the classroom too. So I do recommend those practices for kids too.
That's wonderful. I mean, that's such a physical, visual thing that you do, but that's helpful for adults too. Some people are
absolutely
better for that way and can't see it in their mind. There's nothing wrong with like doing like the physical motion of it. That's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Yes, especially if you're starting out in your like magic practice, I recommend using your hands and having that physical act, because it goes so much further, even with intention setting.
I still do that sometimes. I have no problem with visualization, and I can see things in my mind's eye. I know that's not everybody is capable of that. I can. I will still do things like physically, and I'm like physically draw it out. I'm like, here's my boundary. Like use my hand, use my wand. I'm like, this is it, or like mark it in some way. It's just helpful. So
yes, absolutely.
Your 5-year-old has the right idea. I like it.
Yes, it's awesome. So, and those are really going to be the best ways to protect yourself from beings, especially like darker energies and beings, and including like, it's like hexes or spells. Like that's another thing that, it's a whole different conversation, of the sense of, our words. Some people can like energetically hex us unconsciously, just based off of their words and their feelings towards us. So those kinds of protections will shield you and your family from those things as well.
And that happens so much more than you would think. And they do not have to be witches. I will tell you that.
Yes, absolutely. And most of the time they're not. Like
most of the time they're not, because they don't know that they're doing it. But yeah, my husband has had that plenty of times with, you know, certain family members where he just comes home. He's like, I feel awful after going over that. Why do I come home like that? I'm like, oh yeah. Let me pull out the crystals. We're going to do some work.
Yes, exactly.
People just, they don't realize that they are sending they might not, you know, be intentionally doing it, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen.
Yeah. I was working with a client, and, you know, she was like, I don't know why all of a sudden I feel like so sick and so lethargic. And so, you know, we've been working together for a little while. And, you know, I went in, I was like, okay, well, let me just go. I'll check your energy. Let's just do another reading. And she actually was experiencing like a hex from somebody, but somebody was what I would call like a muggle. Like they're not spiritually open. They're not like into energy work and stuff like that. But their specific energy, like they had a very strong emotional reaction to my client because of like a certain situation with like an ex or something like that. And so they were jealous. They had this really big emotion. And then they, you know, whatever they were speaking over her, like behind her back or like in their own mind's eye, that emotion paired with the words becomes a spell in itself. And so it hexed her. It hexed her energy, and she, like, her protections were down, you know, at this point in time whenever it happened. And so, like, a lot of people think that it's like witches who hex, or like it's like you have to be magical, but a lot of everyday muggle people do that because it just takes a strong enough emotion and some type of like either visual of like, oh, I hope that like they spill their coffee, or I hope that they don't end up, you know, getting married or whatever because of that emotion. And that's in itself like a curse or a hex.
It is. And that can happen all the time. And, you know,
yes,
the witches who are listening, it works when you do that yourself. So just so you know, if you're putting that out, thinking that way, which I will sometimes do on purpose. Like if somebody cuts me off in traffic, I'm like, I hope that you don't find a parking spot for a week and you would park at the back of the lot every place you go. Like, I hope that energy to them, but it's a very real does happen.
Yes. So, and that's just like the, you know, daily like frustration. So then when you're having somebody who really felt hurt by you for some reason, you know, that's a really strong energy to kind of be attaching itself to you. So doing those protections regularly and cleansing is going to help you clear that out and keep any of those kinds of things from actually coming into your energetic bubble. And I'm like using my hands to explain as if you can see me, but
have you had any experiences where something is attached to someone, but it wasn't theirs, that maybe it was passed on from someone else, passed down maybe to them? Because I am for myself, I am jury's out on generational curses. Like, I don't know, like that would be the right word for it, but I do think that there is traumas that can be passed on from like I usually call it generational curses, but not in the sense, not in the like same way where I like looked up what that technically means, but how I use it is like and it can happen with means is like very dramatic and like pop culture-y, like this movie, like the evil witch like cursed all your family line. I'm like, I don't know about that.
And it's not usually that. So a lot of times what I find is like there's a being attached because of some type of trauma that happened to your grandmother, your mother. And I work with a lot of women. So a lot of my examples are like female oriented and female line oriented. And it's passed down. And that's a lot of times those are like really dense beings because they're not hanging really like outside of your energetic body, but like kind of like in your energy. And that's where, you know, it can turn into things like diseases that are passed down. So I actually, you know, I've worked with lots of clients who struggle with depression and their mothers struggled with depression, like where it's in their family line. And a lot of times it's passed down and there is a being in there. And the illness in itself has its own energetic code that's passed down because of a specific trauma. And one of the interesting things that I found is that you know, sometimes like for people who they might not have depression the first half of their life, and then all of a sudden it's really intense and it's really severe. And when it has that ancestral energetic like dynamic, what usually happens is that wound was passed down, passed down, passed down, and then something felt energetically similar to the wound that the grandmother or the great grandmother experienced. And so therefore it like turned it on as a survival response, as opposed to just like, and as opposed to how we see it as an illness. I've also seen this with personality disorders where like the mother was a narcissist and the daughter's a narcissist, and like the grandmother was like, you know, borderline. Like I've seen that also with personality disorders. And so it's really interesting to see how these things are passed down, but it usually happens when there are wounds that have been unprocessed when the person has passed, or when like certain intentions are set. Like you might have a person who passes away and was like, and hasn't dealt with stuff and was like, I will never, her energy's like, I will never let the women in my family experience this kind of pain again. But because it's coming from an unprocessed place, it might take form in like a specific physical illness, or like infertility and things like that. And I've also talked about this topic with some of my friends, my colleagues who are like medical intuitives or fertility intuitives, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate for anyone, you know, listening, that we said at the beginning of this that the medical goes hand in hand. So if you are doing this healing, but like while you're doing that and working on all these things and doing your protections, that your brain chemistry needs the help of medication. That's what modern medicine is there for. They go hand in hand. So don't feel like we're saying like, you know, clear this energy and you're going to be okay. Like people need help, and that is why that help exists. And you should.
Absolutely. I always tell my clients, I'm like, if you need medicine to like lift the bottom to help you do this work, that's what it's there for. I like, you know, it's there to help you to get to a place where you can start to do the healing and you can start to do the processing. Like if you're at a point where you can't, you know, sleep, you can't eat, you're not getting out of bed, you know, and you need something to help you with that so that you can just function, so that you can show up and do the work. That's really important. And like, you know, all my friends who like are medical colleagues and were nurses before they entered the energy work, you know, we'll talk about like medicine is still helpful. Like this energy, doing energy work, doing these healings doesn't mean that medicine, like now you don't need medicine. There's still going to be times where you may need it for things, but this is just on a deeper level. And so I totally I agree. Like it's just they go hand in hand. You're using them together makes it so much more powerful and more effective.
Yeah. I always want to reiterate that we like both hand in hand, and you know, we never want anybody to go off their medication because they are doing this energy work. Like talk to your doctor and professionals and know that the help is there if you need it. Both of those things are very important, but you know that as a licensed professional. I am the kid of a doctor, so I'm like, we like vaccines and medication and all of those things. Wonderful.
Absolutely.
Covering my house in crystals and doing all sorts of cleansing with herb bottles. All of those things go hand in hand here.
And I absolutely. I tell people, I'm like, modern medicine isn't like, it was still great. It's still a gift. It just means like now we're in a time when we can bridge like ancient practices with modern medicine and have these beautiful, beautiful results that are more effective, that happen faster. And I think that that's just a wonderful thing.
It absolutely is. I want to thank you very much for sharing your expertise and all of your opinions on this subject, because I think that the whole idea of the darker energy and how that affects your mental and physical health is something that people, I would say fear was the right word there, that they don't want to talk about it, don't want to address it, and they don't want to scare their patients away, being like, oh, there's this dark energy around you. Well, it sounds scary, but look at all of these ways that you can help.
You have way more power than you think you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure when you have a whole bunch of dense energy surrounding you, it feels like you have no power, that they have the power, but
they don't. Absolutely. They will leave because you can make them leave. And that is the best thing that I have ever learned.
Well, thank you so much for being here. If another shout out for just your platforms. If somebody wanted to work with you and reach out to you, where could they go for that?
So you can go to my Instagram, which is Annamarie at Annamarie F Green, or my website, AnnamarieGreen.com. And you can either message me and ask about what the options are, but I do currently have 30-minute readings and 30-minute healings to start off. And I will include for you to put in the show notes, a discount code or an offer code, for a special offer code for your audience. If you would want to work with me, or, you want to work with me about like a child or a family member. I also do that with people too. So I would love to hear from you guys, even if it's just to ask a question about this topic.
Thank you.
And thank you for having me. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I've loved having this conversation. Thank you so much.
Absolutely appreciate it. And listeners, I will have all of that information that we just mentioned linked over in the show notes at witchwednesdays.com, so you can check all of that out. And that is everything that I've got for this week. And I will see you guys next week.
Need even more? Subscribe to Patreon and YouTube for exclusive bonus content. Order a themed witchcraft box every month through Witch Wednesdays on Etsy. Be sure to follow on Instagram at Witch Wednesdays Podcast. Find all these links and more at witchwednesdays.com.